Recently, I've been really into shiny hunting Pokemon. I've been doing a lot of soft resets and even got this shiny Torchic in Alpha Sapphire. It can be a bit tedious doing the same thing over and over again though, but if I turn on the L equals A feature, it makes it a bit easier so I can just use one hand to mash the A button and have my other hand free to shiny hunt in another game. I need help. The L equals A function exists in pretty much every Pokemon game. I can use it to substitute the A button press on the main menu of Alpha Sapphire, the main menu of Fire Red. Then in Platinum version, L equals A is a feature, but it just doesn't work in the main menu, making soft resetting for a shiny starter in Platinum version that much more annoying, as L equals A only works when you're playing the actual game in Platinum, so you have to use both hands to soft reset. It's like this in Heart Gold and Soul Silver too. Then in Generation 5, they just don't have the L equals A feature at all, and then it returned in Generation 6. This is just one random obscure thing in Pokemon that I found recently, and there's a lot more. Like, let's say you're playing Pokemon Red and Blue on official hardware. I mean, I don't know how else you would play Pokemon Red and Blue. But if you're on a regular Game Boy, it'll just be black and white, and if you're on a Game Boy Color, red version will have a red hue, while blue version will have this blue hue. You can actually change the color palette of these games on your Game Boy Color too, and if you make it dark brown, which looks disgusting, the big benefit here is when you enter a cave without flash, you can see where you're going rather than everything being dark and the walls being black. It makes it easy to travel through dark caves, which is pretty neat. Pokemon Crystal is only compatible with the Game Boy Color and has a wide variety of color. It's the first game where you can play as a girl as well, and there isn't too much of a difference between which character you play as until you look at the town map that each character gets. If you pick the girl character, these squares for each town will be blue, but if you're the male character, those squares will be red instead. Do you guys like event distribution Pokemon? They kind of lost their touch in recent years, but in Generation 3 and 4, they had some of the coolest events. Generation 4 had a lot of their event Pokemon in special Cherish Balls even, that you can't normally obtain, which were commonly saved for mythical Pokemon like Mew or Darkrai. But do you know what the first Pokemon to ever be distributed in a Cherish Ball was? You'll never guess it unless you already know the answer, but it was Tropius. It was distributed in the Pokemon Center in Japan in February of 2007. Cherish Balls are almost exclusively used for legendary or mythical Pokemon nowadays, but do you know what the second Pokemon ever distributed with a Cherish Ball was? Surely this one has to be a legendary or a mythical, right? Well, depending on who you ask, this is a legendary Pokemon, alright, as it was Whiscash, which happens to be one of my favorite Pokemon even. Speaking of Generation 4, check this out as well. This is Milotic. This is what a shiny female Milotic looks like in the English copies of Pokemon Platinum version, and here's what it looks like in the Japanese copies of Platinum version. Notice the difference? The antennas in the Japanese shiny are blue, unlike regular Milotic, but in the English version they're red. This was a mistake with the coloring that they fixed for the international releases. Milotic has some pretty crazy sideburns, or maybe their eyebrows, I can't really tell, but they can benefit from a trimmer, so that's where today's sponsor, Manscaped, comes into play. Look, I know what you might be thinking, but Manscaped has more products than that, like the Manscaper Beard Hedger Pro. I've been in the market for a new beard trimmer for a while, as my old one is dull and doesn't give me a clean and even shave anymore. I'm excited to be one of the first to give a sneak peek at the Beard Hedger, so let's check it out. Only one guard is needed for 20 different lengths, and I tested it out myself and thought it came out pretty nicely. This kit includes more than just the Beard Hedger though, as there's also this beard oil infused with sweet almond, sunflower seed, and jojoba seed. There's also some beard shampoo and conditioner to keep your beard looking nice and clean, beard balm, a travel case even, and a free gift like a beard brush, a comb, and scissors. I desperately needed this, as you can tell from the before shots and the after shots. This is just what I needed to maintain my beard, and you can go to Manscaped today to save 20% off your order and free international shipping with code PaPaSea. Thanks again to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. I always thought that Pokemon abilities were a rather cool concept that made Pokemon feel more unique from one another. Some Pokemon have signature abilities, and some abilities do the exact same thing, as other abilities would have different names like Huge Power and Pure Power. They did this a lot in Generation 3 when they first introduced abilities, and they also did this with the abilities Soundproof and Cacophony, except no Pokemon gets Cacophony, and it was never fully implemented into the game despite appearing in the game's code and also being listed in the Japanese version of Pokemon Box if you want to start your Pokemon by ability. Here's something else I noticed when playing through Pokemon Fire Red recently. If you talk to an NPC or a sign, when it reaches the final dialogue box and the dialogue finishes, you could just walk in any other direction to exit out of the dialogue, and you don't have to press A to end it. I thought maybe this was only in Fire Red and Leaf Green, but I tested it in Platinum and Soul Silver and it worked the same as well, just for it to not work in Crystal version or Ruby version. I thought maybe starting with Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green they changed it, but this also doesn't work with the Sun and Emerald version either, even though it released after Fire Red and Leaf Green. And another thing I noticed while playing through Fire Red was how in Viridian City, when the gym is locked, if you try to enter it, you're told it's locked and your character will immediately turn around and jump over the ledge. Normally when you jump over a ledge in a Pokemon game, especially in Fire Red, it'll play this sound, but it doesn't play in front of the gym when this happens. This is Erica. You probably knew that, and while she's always seen wearing a kimono and a headband, she's gone through quite a few design changes over the years like most Kanto gym leaders have. In her official art from Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver though, you'll notice the Hearts Gold logo on her headband as well as on her waistband. This could be from Ho-Oh's relation to rainbows, how Erica gives out the rainbow badge, but none of the other Kanto gym leaders in Heart Gold and Soul Silver have either of the game's logos on them. On top of that, while the official art shows her headband and waistband being red, they're more magenta or pink in-game. Oh yeah, and by the way, in the manga, Erica has this cool bow and arrow that she uses, and she even tried to kill an Eevee once. The manga's pretty weird, but what about Golurk? Not a Pokemon you hear too much about, and I'm sure you all know the classic obscure fact about how Golurk can apparently fly, despite not having wings, but did you know that in the anime, as well as in some spin-off games, Golurk has a canon mode where it can transform into this thing. This was never a thing in the Pokemon games, however in Pokemon X and Y, Golurk's model was made so it could easily transform into this canon mode even though it was never fully implemented, and it could never do that in Generation 5, the generation it was introduced in. Usually in these obscure fact videos, we tend to focus on the first few generations of Pokemon, but how about we talk about a Pokemon new to Scarlet and Violet, one that was even added as recently as the Teal Mask DLC. Poltergeist can be seen with these green lines repairing the cracks on it, which is inspired by a Japanese art called kintsugi. This is where they fix the cracks in pottery with a powder mixed with gold or sometimes platinum to create an effect that looks like this, which is very similar to Poltergeist. How about shiny Pokemon? I know I talked about them a little bit at the start of this video, but here I am bringing them up again. They were first introduced in Generation 2 the same time Unknown was introduced. You could shiny hunt for Unknown in Pokemon Gold, Silver, or Crystal, sort of, but only if the Unknown you're searching for is an Unknown I or an Unknown V shiny. None of the other Unknown forms in Generation 2 can be shiny due to how shiny Pokemon were determined in that generation. There's a complex formula that involves many attributes like a Pokemon's DVs, or stats basically, along with their gender and some other factors, and when it comes to Unknown in Generation 2, one of those determining factors is what letter it happens to be in, and it only works for the letters I and V to be shiny. It's the same reason why a female Cyndaquil can't be shiny in Generation 2, which really makes resetting for a shiny one a bit quicker since you can just reset once you see it's a female. Continuing along with Generation 2, there's a fair share of items that only existed in Generation 2, but there's also some items that are unused or just a bit weird, like TM28 and TM28. Yeah, there's two TM28s in Generation 2. One of the TM28s is Dig and it works normally, and the other TM28 is a regular item, not a TM, that isn't stored in the TM part of the bag. It has no effect, it looks like a berry when it's held by a Pokemon, and has a description of first turn, burrow, second turn, attack. There's also HM08 through HM12, which are all unused and go in the same regular item pouch. These items can't be obtained normally in the game, and the Pokemon Crystal Disassembly project has an explanation for why these items exist, which I'll link below because I can't really explain it or understand it properly. But basically it has to do with how held items from time capsule Pokemon from Generation 1 are figured out, with the duplicate TM28s being a leftover item from this. And those are just some more obscure things I found in Pokemon over the last few months or so. I haven't made an obscure facts video in a while, since over the last 5 years or so of making these Pokemon fact videos, I thought I covered everything, but more things keep popping up the more I look into Pokemon. I'm also aware of the recent Game Freak leaks for the older games that show up a lot of the beta and unused contents of those older games, and perhaps once things settle down with that, I can make a more concise video on them. But with all that out of the way, hope you guys enjoyed, consider leaving a like and subscribe for more Pokemon videos. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day, I'll see y'all next time, and bye bye!